Thank you so much, Suresh, and I'm very honored and pleased to be here in India. I'm very grateful for the invitation of your organization and WEO. I will speak about not artificial intelligence, but avian influenza. I'll try to show you a bit what happens globally. And I need to start, of course, with some definitions. As many of you know, we have two types of avian influenza, what we call LP, low pathogenicity, and HP, high pathogenicity. They are different by the impact they have, mortality and morbidity, and there is actually the World Animal Health Organization has a definition, very strict definition of what is HPAI. Nevertheless, we know that some LPAI have also high impact on the health of poultry, and so the definition is sometimes a bit blurred. Nevertheless, when we look at the different types of avian influenza, all HPAI are either H5 or H7. There is yet no other example of HPAI. Of course, there are H5 and H7 that also LP, that also low pathogenicity. So that's also a bit confusing. But today, all HP are either H5 or H7. That's important to remember. So why is it a problem? Well, first, of course, we don't want to see our layer hens, our chicks, sick and dying, so there is a direct impact on the economics of farming. The indirect impact is that you need, or the government obliges you to cull around the farm infected, so we do get rid of a lot of healthy layer hens, healthy turkey, healthy chickens, because when an outbreak happens, you need to cull around the outbreak. There are social issues. I mentioned the price of eggs, but you have also the morale of farmers. When you lose all your animals twice a year, it can become really very impactful on your mental health. And of course, also the disruption of in case of broiler, of slaughtering and job losses. Importantly, there is also a public health risk. We know that with HPAI, we have very few cases globally. I think, I can't remember exactly the number, but it's a few hundreds over the last years with a high rate of mortality. If you get HPAI as a human, you have a 50% chance of dying. And so, even though, as of today, we never had HPAI being passed from human to human, we know that this is a possibility. So there is a huge risk, relatively low risk today, but with very high consequences, I should say. Of course, when you get HPAI in a country, there are trade limitations that the country don't accept some of your exports, especially regarding breeding chickens, but also broiler meat, etc., and also eggs in some cases. So trade restrictions are also very, very impactful. And of course, the impact of wild birds. For example, this season in Europe, but also in the US, we have a high mortality of cranes. This impact on wild animals is may seem not so important for us as poultry farmers, but as these wild birds come to reinfect our farms, this is also a big problem for us. So what happened really? Why does HPAI become such a concern in the last couple of years? Well, a long time ago, what happened was very few outbreaks from time to time. You had low pathogenicity viruses in the wild birds. They would sometimes mutate and infect domestic birds, and you would have an outbreak from time to time. Then in '96, what happened is that an HPAI mutant established itself permanently in domestic poultry. And that started with China, or with a virus isolated in China. But the situation changed, and we had regular crisis every 2 or 3 years with emergence of HPAI within domestic poultry. And then at the beginning of this century, at the beginning of this decade, what happened is that this clade of HPAI, a mutant of HPAI, installed itself permanently in white birds. And that's a situation we've had now for the 3-4 last years. That is, we have every time there is a migration, we have a crisis or we have a number of outbreaks. That's exactly what's happening now in Europe, where we're getting into the end of the migration from north to south, and we have a very high number of cases. And what we can show is that there is a strict correlation between the number of cases in white birds and the number of outbreaks in domestic birds. So the situation changed permanently, and we know that HPAI is here to stay. Sorry, it seems that voila, going back to the right slide. So what happened is that you have that's the situation of last year from October to October, and you can see that you have a global spread of HPAI, even in Antarctica, even the South Pole. The only region that is still not under this H5 strain is Oceania, and we expect it to happen anytime. And for the last months, the statistics is about very different. Of course, we have very fewer cases, but you can see that the spread is probably going to be exactly the same in this year, coming year, versus last year. So, a word about vaccination. First, as many of you know, when you have a case of HPAI in a country, you must declare it to the World Animal Health Organization. Usually, this will stop trade for you, and you cannot export for a while until you are declaring yourself against free of HPAI. If your country was free before, this takes only 28 days. If your country was not free before, it takes usually a couple of months, about a year. If a country chooses to use vaccines officially against HPAI, then it will lose some markets in trade. And the reason is that if you vaccinate, other trade partners will suspect that you have the virus circulating in your country. And it's understandable. Yeah, coming back, sorry. We're good. So, with that said, the World Animal Health Organization does encourage vaccination as a strategic management tool. The World Animal Health Organization doesn't say that you should vaccinate, but it says that if a country chooses to vaccinate, it's fine, provided that the surveillance of what viruses circulate in a country is reinforced. And this statement of the World Animal Health Organization has been reaffirmed again and again and again, especially at the last general session last year, and will be reaffirmed regularly by the World Animal Health Organization. So it's okay to vaccinate, and you can trade, that's allowed, if you reinforce your surveillance. So as of today, what have we seen? We had a number of countries that were practicing vaccination for a long time, and I've listed them on top of this list. I won't repeat them. And what we see is progressively some countries are also bringing vaccination in their management tool against HPAI. We had France vaccinating ducks now for the last 2 years. We had a number of countries in South America choosing to vaccinate layers and breeders. The Philippines are starting to vaccinate in Asia, and South Africa is also limited, but some vaccination going on. So as the pressure increases because of the wild birds infecting domestic birds regularly, we see some countries vaccinating officially. Now, HPAI, I hope now it's well understood by you. It's a bit different from other diseases because you cannot just vaccinate like you vaccinate against bronchitis or like a laryngotracheitis or so on. You have to have an authorization from your veterinary services if you want to officially vaccinate. And that takes a lot of effort because if you want to export, you need an agreement for the trade partners, so you need to involve your government to negotiate these agreements. So you cannot just vaccinate like that. The other point is that you also need to vaccinate all together, because the goal of vaccination in this case is to stop transmission between farms and stop transmission back to wild birds. So you need to vaccinate all together. And that takes also agreement on who does what, who is financing, who is paying. In France, for example, part of the vaccination and surveillance is paid by the government, part by the farmers. In some other countries, it's the farmers who pay everything, etc., etc. So all that needs quite a bit of work with your authorities, either provincial or central organization. The World Health Organization has produced a number of tools about vaccination that you can access to if you are a member. This morning I wanted to access them and reread some of them. They are extremely good. They are still very valid. They are old by a year or so now, I think, Julian, but they are extremely useful. And you have a lot of information there on how to build your vaccination plan with your different stakeholders, but also very practical information on how to vaccinate within your farm. So please, if you can, go and look it up, because this is very good stuff, in my opinion. So as layer farmers, if I want to vaccinate, is it possible? Yes, vaccination is relatively easy. I think preparing vaccination plan is complicated, but vaccination is relatively easy. You have, for example, I've quoted this one because this is something that is in the strategy of some countries in the vaccination plan. You can vaccinate with a vector vaccine, either the day-old chick or even in the egg, and you have one booster to do. You could even go without booster, because these vaccines, vector vaccine, have a very long duration of immunity that can last the whole life of a laying hens, but most people would do a booster. So not too much work. You do the booster a couple of weeks later on pullets, not during the production phase, so relatively easy to do. But as I was saying, you need more surveillance, and that involves sending regularly dead animals to a lab for doing PCR. This involves more vet surveillance. This involves also serology, more serologies, in particular to control that the quality of the vaccination is okay. So even if vaccination is not a huge cost and a huge effort for farmers, surveillance is. And so there is a burden there that you want to keep in mind. And of course, I haven't insisted on biosecurity, but as you all know, and I was discussing with some of you on biosecurity, how important it is before this meeting, you absolutely need to have very strict biosecurity. This is coming to you now from wild birds. So everything that looks like a pool near your buildings, everything that looks like feed that is left over beside the building that could attract wild birds, all these things are extremely important, not to speak, of course, of the hygiene of workers and things like that. So, in conclusion, HPAI is here to stay. Biosecurity remains the main tool against HPAI, and vaccination is a supplementary tool that will be more and more used, with, of course, the burden of added surveillance that needs to be agreed on in collaboration with the veterinary services. Thank you so much for your attention.